بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمني بنور الفهم اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. Alhamdulillah, we have tawfiq to continue our study of Ma'arif al-Qur'an. We said that in order to exercise our free will, there are three important factors. One is to have desire or desires. The other is knowledge. The third is power. Ayat Misbah says this triangle prepares the ground for our free will and our journey. And he compares this with a car. He says our desires are like engines that give us energy to move. Our knowledge is like the light which enlightens the path. And power is about the means, like tires, etc., which are helping us to act as we want. But maybe there is another way also, of course, to mention this. For example, maybe you can say if there is a car, power is the engine and knowledge is the light and desires are the driver who takes the steer and moves us right, left, straight, etc. Anyway, we need all these three elements. There are many discussions about desires. We had some discussions before. Here he makes few references to some ways of classifying human desires. For example, sometimes they can be divided to individual and social. Those which are by instinct, they are normal, not always individual. But the rest, like emotions, are more social. Or for example, sometimes there are feelings that we have about ourselves. For example, you feel afraid, there is a fear about yourself, there is a danger, sometimes about others. So it can be individual or social. It can be material, physical on the one hand, or spiritual on the other hand, or psychological. There's a difference between psychological and spiritual, so it can be both. For example, sometimes our desire is just to meet the needs of body through instincts. You become hungry, you become thirsty, etc. But some desires are after you meet the needs of the body. For example, imagine you have had good food, good drink, etc., whatever you need for your body, but then there is desire for happiness, for joy. And this is not what body directly needs, although I believe that if you are happy or sad, it would have an impact on your body and health, etc. But happiness is not something which is directly related to the body. So it's non-physical. Another classification is that they said human desires can be material or related to our physiology. They can be about our soul, but not very high ones. Like, for example, being happy, being joyful, being comfortable, or having peace. Not deep peace, like tranquility, but not being under stress. But sometimes they are related to the soul and are more fundamental. Like when you have some ideals that you want to pursue, or you are after justice, after freedom, etc. So the first was material or physical. The second was about soul, but lower desires. And the third was about the soul, but higher desires. Some people have said then our ideals, our sublime ideals, are divided into three. Sometimes they are about haqq-ju'i, seeking truth, a desire for understanding realities and facts. As you remember, in the Hawza Akhlaq series and also in the series on indicators of piety, we said that truthfulness seems to be the most fundamental value in Islamic ethics. So some people say this is something which is built inside human beings, that by their very nature they are searching and looking for the truth. The second thing is fadilat khahi. Haqq-ju'i is related to the truth. Fadilat khahi means to be interested in virtues, like justice, like freedom, like nobility, the honor, etc. The third is about seeking beauty, ziba talabi. Any kind of beauty that human beings have interest in. It can be about things that can be seen, like when you look at a flower. Sometimes we enjoy the beauty of the flower, which can be seen. Sometimes, in addition to that, can be the smell. The smell is also beautiful. Although maybe people think that beauty is just what can be seen, but beauty can be extended to any kind of beauty. Sometimes there's a beautiful voice, beautiful sound, beautiful touch. Something, when you touch it, or some materials. Or for example, if you touch clothes, which is very soft. And sometimes is not about five senses. It is related to our imaginations, etc. Like, for example, beauty of poems, which sometimes is about the way they satisfy our khayal, but sometimes also the way they present the truth. There can be different things. Some people said, in addition to haqiqat ju'i, fazilat khahi wa ziba talabi, means in addition to seeking the truth and seeking virtues and seeking beauty, there is a fourth type of desire, and that is for worship, for being religious, for being connected to a transcendent reality. Some people said this is actually underlying the first three. They all go back to this. Then they have also discussion about which desires are more basic and genuine and which are not. We also said before in the discussion about knowing yourself, ma'rifatun nafs, that our desires are sometimes for survival, so just being alive, being able to continue our life. So it's a matter of length of the life, quantity of the life, like food, like clothes, protection from enemies, But sometimes it's about quality of life, as I have mentioned in ethical relativism. Something which is about condition of life. It's not that if you don't have this, you will die necessarily, but if you have it, your life becomes more meaningful, more attractive, more pleasing. Ayat Misbah says these classifications are not that much required for our discussion. This is what psychologists can discuss. And what is important for us is that in the discussion about free will for human beings, we should acknowledge that we cannot satisfy all our desires. Always, sooner or later, conflicts between desires and desirables happen. Tazahum. Desire between comfort and desire between, for example, having more pleasure in other senses. For example, if you don't work and just sleep or relax, so you are satisfying some desires, but also you are depriving yourself from other desires. This is tazahum, this is conflict. We have to prioritize, to prefer one over the other. Then it's here that our role appears. Again, I have discussed this in self-knowledge and in ethical relativism. It's not that much, not of course 100%, but many times the difference between people, especially for example people who have understood certain values and accepted them or follow a religion, the differences between them is not that much in what desires they have. If you give a list of those things which are desirable to different people who are believers, for example, or even non-believer, many times you see that lots of commonalities are there. But the question is, which one is more important, so that if there is conflict, you prioritize. For example, it's not that a believer or a sincere person who is religious would not enjoy having good food or good house or good car or travel, have holidays. But it's not that they don't like these things. Many times they like these things, but how important they are and what we are going to sacrifice in order to reach these things, this is the most fundamental question. So he says the question is به هنگام تضاد خواستها چه چیز موجب ترجیح می شود. We have to prioritize some desires over others. The question is, when there is conflict between these desires, what leads to preferring certain over others? So, psychologists have mentioned a few things that can lead to preference. One is hayajanat, when people are excited and stimulated, their desires are triggered. So they say that when a a particular desire is stimulated and reaches a level of excitement, then normally would lead to other desires being undershadowed. So, suppose someone is very, very, hungry, very, very hungry, then other desires disappear. Or if someone is very much, lonely and in front of a friend, for example, maybe other desires would be covered. Or if someone, sexual desire is triggered, then maybe doesn't, bother about other things, and this one is not letting that person to do other things, for example. Of course, he can control it, but there is a great pressure here in the conflict. The second factor is habit, or that. When you are used to do something, when you are used to going after certain desires, then it's very difficult not to do so. Automatically, you want to satisfy that. But we are not very much interested in this kind of habitual desires. We are interested in the things that we need. Maybe we have not made habit for them. So, برای ما آنچه اهمیت دارد, what is important, what matters for us, to us, is that when a human being wants to freely make a decision, then here what should be considered? When you want to make a free choice, what factors are really important? When it comes to animal desires that we share with animals, different things can trigger them. Sometimes external things like being exposed to certain things can trigger animal desires. Sometimes hormones inside our body can trigger them. Here, body affects the spirit. Soul is influenced by the body. This is common between human beings and animals. What is important for us is when our desires conflict with each other, what should we do? Or when our habits and excitements take us to another direction, what should we do? He says, from Qur'an and Hadith, we can understand that the main value of human beings is to be able to regulate their desires, to manage their desires, to prioritize properly one or a set of desires over others. But the question is how we do that, how we make choices. The main factor in making choices is ladha, pleasure. Although some people have said maybe the reason for choosing one over the other is maslaha, the interest, ya manfa'a, the benefit. But he says in the end of the day, everything should be translated into ladha. When you get pleasure from something, you go after it. And everything that we do, directly or indirectly, or in one step or few steps, would reach the point that would bring ladha or reduces the pain. Maybe once I told you that we had a PhD in Qom many years ago. I was the supervisor, or advisor, I think was supervisor, about ladha, based on Mullah Sadra and others in defining sa'ada, happiness, felicity. But this is different from hedonism. It's different from those who are only interested in pleasure, because their pleasure is just materialistic and physical pleasure and short-term pleasure. What we mean by pleasure here is something that can be intellectual, something that can be eternal, not just something that is for satisfying immediate physical needs. Sometimes it is lazza by bringing pleasure, sometimes it is by reducing or releasing, completely removing pain. خب, if it goes to lazza, then how can we choose one desire over the other? One way is to look at the level and the degree of pleasure that they give. So if you have different options, to see which one gives you more pleasure in the full sense, not just physical, short-term pleasure. But there are challenges here. For example, if someone wants to compare the pleasure of eating and drinking in the months of Ramadan with the pleasure that gets from the reward of fasting in the hereafter, and see which one gives more pleasure or a stronger pleasure. Well, here the problem is that we have not experienced those pleasures which come later in Akhir al-Zaman or hereafter. You have tasted, for example, food. The food that you want to eat now in the months of Ramadan, you are fasting, the desire that you have is for something that you know the taste and you know how much pleasure you can get from it. But you don't know the pleasure of going to heaven. You don't know the pleasure of getting this reward or that reward. So this is one challenge. We cannot really judge which one to prefer. The other thing is about time. Is this pleasure, for example, taking or remaining for 5 minutes, for 5 hours, for 5 days? What about the other side? Maybe this gives lots of quick pleasure, but the other one gives pleasure for the long term, for years. For years. The third thing is to see how much perfection this makes in me. Because pleasure, if it is done properly and comes properly, is based on having a kind of perfection. It means having some potential things become actual kamal. If I don't have experience, I only experience worldly things, I don't know how much that kamal or perfection is valuable, how important it is, how much pleasure I get. So I cannot properly measure them and compare and prefer them. So we can consider these criteria, like which one is more enduring, which one brings better kinds of perfection in us. But the thing is that although they can help us, but still we can be sometimes confused. There are many things that we have not experienced. Also, there are things that maybe you have experienced, but time has passed. For example, imagine if you had very good spiritual pleasure, but many years ago, and now you can get pleasure from eating a delicious food. If you have forgotten that, you may think this is more important because it is more powerful. Sometimes also human beings, based on their age and experiences, may have not experienced some kinds of pleasure, like a child that has not experienced the pleasure of marital relation. So what should be the basis of our choice? معیار انتخاب, criterion for choice. Here the role of knowledge becomes very clear. In that triangle of desire, knowledge, and power, the desire is important, the power is important, but the more important is knowledge. So, he says, پس عامل تحرک در واقع لذت خواهی و لذت خواهی و اجتناب از الم است. So what moves us is seeking pleasure or avoiding pain, which is sometimes related to body, sometimes related to spirit, although there are interactions between them. Sometimes even eating food can have impact on the soul. For example, it is known that saffron brings joy. It's maybe anti-depression. Or adas, lentil brings softness of the heart. But sometimes it's not possible to relate it, at least easily, to body. Like when someone feels very lonely and needs someone to give him uns and acquaintance. So when human beings want to make decision, then they need to know, and they become sometimes confused, that what is the criteria for pleasure, when, for whom, consequences, etc. So he says these factors like duration, like for example perfection, etc., these are important, but we are not able to make concrete and consistent account just by considering these things. The first thing that we need to do is to use these things and start thinking about yourself, do ma'rifatun nafs. For example, are you going to be in this world only for a few years or few decades maximum, or you are going to have an eternal life? So you have to consider this. Sometimes, unfortunately, we consider as our life only the amount we are in dunya, but this is not enough. We have to also see what potentials we have. Unless you know what you can achieve, you don't appreciate your choices. So we need to know what human beings can become, what level they can reach. And then we need to achieve certain things which are matters of perfection. Where do these perfections come from? Where the existential side of it is arranged? So if we want to give proper answers to the questions related to how we can make our choices, then we can say part of this discussion is related to Khuda shenasi, part of it is related to Ma'ad shenasi, or as they call al-Mabda'u wal-Ma'ad, the origin and the future. And based on the origin and future, you can understand what you are supposed to do now. So if you want to have a proper value system for yourself or for your community, society, etc., you need to know Mabda the origin and the resurrection as returning back. He says some people have very much, get stuck in such discussion, but we can, alhamdulillah, clearly say that it's not possible to know the value system without having understanding of mabda and ma'ad, the origin and the resurrection. So if we want to know human beings properly, we need to consider akhirah. We need to see what actions in dunya lead to good or bad results in the akhirah and what potentials we have. We should also try to, little by little, get rid of any implication and signs and outcomes of being short-sighted and only see dunya. Normally, for example, we say, how much that person lived, what was his age. But the reality is that person has not stopped living at the time of death. That person is continuing the hayat, the life in barzakh, and the duration should not be limited to the worldly years. In any case, if we don't know mabda, we don't know where perfection comes from. If we don't know ma'ad, we don't know what should we aim at and what are the credits that we have to have. After this, then there is a discussion about what types of ma'rifah are needed in choosing our path. If I want to know in the current time, which is my only opportunity, past has gone, future has not come, I should know my past and my future, but then I should understand what should I do now. How should I exercise my free will now? So this is the topic for the next discussion. He says, human desires are one of the three. Fitri, those things which are in our God-given nature, you don't need to learn them. Second, power to satisfy your desires. And third, knowing the best. Which option is the best so that I go after it. Although, in order to strengthen our desires or to gain power for action, we can do certain things. But the main thing is that someone has put in us something existential, and then through existential connection we can benefit from him for improving in these areas. Then Ayat Misbah starts talking about different stages and levels of af'al ikhtiyari, of voluntary actions or free actions. Inshallah, we will continue this discussion, inshallah, bi'iznillah, when we have opportunity. As I said today, we have some commitments and also the classes in Qom this week. I thought maybe I shouldn't start because of some technical issues. If inshallah for the next week issues are sorted out, we start new subjects and somehow continue this one. If the new subjects don't start, then we continue with this one. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Do you have any questions? No question?
Sheikh.
May Allah bless you, inshallah. Iltimas dua.
What new subject will you be starting? What new subject will you be starting?
Inshallah, if everything goes well, two subjects. One is حقوق و سیاست در Quran, because part of Ma'arif al-Quran by Ayat Misbah is حقوق و سیاست, politics and law from Islamic perspective, Quranic perspective. Alhamdulillah, we finished Khuda Shanasi. We didn't study Jahan Shanasi, but we then started Insan Shanasi. But then there is Akhlaq در Quran. Then there is حقوق and siyasat در Quran. There's اقتصاد در Quran, economy. So there are different parts. One of the important points is حقوق و siyasat, about law and politics in Islam from Quranic perspective. The other subject that inshallah we are studying is Ma'rifat Shanasi, Islamic theory of knowledge, meaning epistemology. We will talk about epistemology, which is something about whether we can know things or we cannot, how we can know them. And this is something that, as you know, some people today doubt the possibility of knowing things or having any kind of certainty, unless it is just psychological certainty. So inshallah we will discuss these two topics, bismillah.
So is that a specific book you're going to teach for epistemology?
For epistemology, I may use different books which are like textbooks in Farsi, and I don't think they are available in English. There are some books that in Imam Khomeini Institute, they are used as textbook for their own students and for courses that they offer in what they call Tarh Vilayat. I don't know, have you ever heard Tarh Vilayat? Tarh Vilayat is program that they offer to university students from all over Iran. Those who are interested, they take part in different cities. So they study few subjects. So there is Akhlaq, there is Gharb Shanasi, there is Huquq Siyasat, and things like this as a package. So part of it is Ma'rifat Shanasi. We may use that textbook, inshallah.
Thank you, Sheikh. Thank you very
May Allah
much.
bless you, inshallah.
I was asking you a while ago about Sharh Manzuma. Do you think we have any time, or is that on the priorities?